3 years after faking my death, I thought the story was really over. Until I opened my front door to find a dozen swords gleaming in the lamplight, pointed right at me. The male protagonist, whom I'd once stabbed, turned around, grinned, and said with a chilling tone, "Long time no see, royal sister." My legs instantly turned to jelly, and I instinctively took a few steps back, only to be stopped by a hand. I turned my head with a trembling gaze to see my former fiancé, whom I'd humiliated. Beside him stood the female lead, whose reputation I had ruined. Chu Lan gritted her teeth, her voice cold and full of hatred. "So you really are a woman?" And this was the 3rd year of my disappearing act. It was also my 21st year in this world. I had diligently toiled for 19 years, perfectly fulfilling all the tasks the system had given me, maintaining the persona of a wicked villainess and diligently pushing the plot forward. For so many years, I had to create trouble for the protagonists on the surface while secretly racking my brains to help them fight back against the major and minor villains. Sometimes I even had to be ruthless enough to hurt myself. What can I say? I was the arch-villain in this story, Xia Yunxiu, the most powerful princess in the land. Fortunately, my hard work wasn't in vain. After the grand finale, the system gave me the wealth I needed to live comfortably for several lifetimes, as promised. The current emperor, who was once my little brother, the male protagonist of this world, was working hard, appointing the right people, and the court was full of talented individuals. Thanks to them, the past 2 years had been peaceful and prosperous. I could stroll carefree through Yangzhou City, fictional or replaced with a Western equivalent, all day, teasing cats and dogs or flirting with attractive men and women. Life was incredibly enjoyable. It seemed that everything was so calm, and those ridiculous, bloody, love-filled plots with swords and shadows really had come to an end. I chuckled foolishly and stumbled out of the warm fragrance house, can be replaced with a Western equivalent, like a tavern or a salon. Wan Yue, the daughter of the landlady who was very close to me, called out worriedly from behind, "Xia Yunxiu, be careful on your way home." I waved to her. It was almost midnight, and the sky was completely dark, with hardly anyone on the streets. Fortunately, I had walked this road hundreds, if not thousands, of times. I could walk it with my eyes closed. Plus, I was quite drunk, and courage grew with alcohol. I wasn't afraid at all and swaggered home alone. Nothing happened along the way. Seeing my familiar front door, I rummaged through my clothes, fumbling for the key. Leaning against the door, I was about to insert the key when the door suddenly swung open, and I tumbled forward. I fell flat on my face, seeing stars. Enduring the dizziness, I propped myself up against the door and struggled to clear my vision. To my horror, I saw a dozen swords gleaming in the lamplight, pointed right at me. Holding the swords were a group of men in black who looked like highly skilled fighters. Even worse, behind them, a man in a black cloak heard the noise and slowly turned to look at me. The moment I saw his face, I sobered up instantly. Xiao Ji looked at me, grinned, revealing a chilling smile, and his voice was like the devil crawling out of hell. "Long time no see, royal sister." My legs instantly turned to jelly, and I instinctively took a few steps back. Suddenly, a large hand stopped me from behind. My whole body turned cold, and I turned my head with a trembling gaze. It was Xinjiang, my former fiancé, whom I had humiliated and with whom I had a deep hatred, now a renowned and powerful official. Beside him stood the female lead of this world, whose reputation I had ruined. Chu Lan was wearing a tight-fitting outfit and no longer looked like an innocent girl. Instead, she carried a claymore on her back, looking heroic and valiant. She gritted her teeth as she looked at me, her voice cold and full of hatred. "Xiao Lan, so you really are a woman." The look in each of their eyes was complicated and vicious, as if they couldn't wait to execute me on the spot, tearing me to pieces. Crap! I'm done for. I tried to call the system for help in my mind, but it didn't respond, no matter how many times I called. In fact, the system had disappeared 3 years ago after my successful fake death and hadn't appeared since. But I still clung to a glimmer of hope. You lousy system. Didn't you say that after completing the plot, you'd guarantee me a lifetime of peace and wealth? So enjoying it for 3 years before dying counts as a lifetime? Xiaoji looked at my flustered expression with great interest for a while before finally raising his hand, signaling to his men. Please escort royal sister to the carriage. It's time to return to the royal palace, can be replaced with a similar Western structure, like a castle or manor. I could only agree, of course. Returning to the royal palace after 3 years, my state of mind was completely different. 3 years ago, I was the overwhelming villainess of the protagonist group, but now, I was just a fish on the chopping board, waiting for the knife to fall on my neck. As for how I was a villain before, it was thanks to the system and the god's perspective of having read the plot in advance. In the original plot, the male protagonist Xiaoji was the illegitimate son of the late emperor's the light of my life. Although he was given the title of prince, his identity was basically known to everyone. The late emperor didn't like him either, which led to him being bullied in the royal palace, can be replaced with a similar Western structure, like a castle or manor. And I, Xiaolon, also known as Yunxiu, was the only of my father. Older brothers, he still treated me the best. He even gave me the same right to participate in politics as the other princes. My father thought that I was just a woman, and no matter what, I couldn't cause much trouble. Until one day, he suddenly realized that my power had infiltrated almost half of the court. My father began to be wary of me. Of course, I wouldn't easily give up the power I had in my hands. I schemed to kill several older brothers and began to support the young Xiaoji. After my father died, I pushed Xiaoji to the throne, using him as a puppet and ruling from behind the curtain. And Chulan, she saw Xiaoji, who was being bullied by me and was on the verge of death, at a party and saved him. From then on, Xiaoji's dark world had light, and that was Chulan. As for Xinjiang, he was the only son of the former chancellor and won the top student spot in the national exam, or scholarship competition. I took a fancy to him and wanted to marry him. But he didn't agree, preferring to resist the decree rather than marry me. In a fit of anger, I had someone kidnap him to the princess's manor. I even shamelessly said, if you don't want to be a prince consort, then you can be my male escort, or kept man. Xinjiang hated me to the extreme and joined the male and female protagonists. 3 years ago, according to the original plot, it was only a matter of time before the grand finale, and I and the system were completely throwing in the towel. Under my promotion, Xiaoji had already taken control of the power, the female protagonist's heartthrob value had been maxed out, and Xinjiang had become a powerful official who stirred up the situation. The people in my court were being eliminated one by one, my power was being hollowed out, and even the servants in the palace were no longer serving me wholeheartedly. At night, the huge palace was left with only me, without even a night watchman to add coal. It had a bit of the feeling of people leaving in Tiku. Ling. Perhaps my inner voice was too loud, and the system couldn't sleep, so it spoke up and asked, "Why aren't you asleep yet at this hour?" I was wrapped in a blanket, lying on the bed, staring intently at the bed frame, and answered him in my heart. I've worked hard as a beast of burden for more than 10 years, and I'm finally retiring. Could you sleep if you were me? The system also woke up when it heard this. I can also take a long vacation after finishing your world. I suddenly became a little nervous. Hey, when will the final plot come? What if I accidentally stab Xiaoji to death? Relax, just stab him. The male protagonist won't die even if you die. I hummed, and was about to speak when the system suddenly interrupted. It's coming, it's coming. What? The male protagonist is coming with people. I immediately understood that the grand finale was tonight. Xiaoji accidentally learned from a maid that the one who killed his mother was my biological mother, so he came to me for revenge. Xiaoji came in alone. He came so suddenly that I didn't have time to dress up. I could only sit on the bed with my hair disheveled, pretending to be aloof, and I didn't even dress properly. Royal sister, are you waiting for me? Xiaoji walked towards me step by step, looking calm. I coldly scolded him, who allowed you to come in? Xiaoji was amused by my words and suddenly reached out and pinched my chin, forcing me to look up and meet his eyes. Royal sister, do you think I'm still the good-for-nothing that you can bully at will and dare not fight back? I raised my hand and slapped him. But there wasn't even a red mark on his face. I used to treat Xiaoji like this, beating and scolding him at will, treating him like a dog. But today, this dog was disobedient. Xiaoji seemed to have rabies, his eyes suddenly turning scarlet, staring at me, and he actually laughed. He said in a hoarse voice, Royal sister, do it again. Crap. I and the system W. Air silent. After a long while, the system finally complained, look at what you've done to the child, he's become a pervert. I almost laughed and secretly pinched myself hard, and tears came out of pain. I took a deep breath in my heart, raised my hand, and slapped him again. This time I used force, and Xiaoji's face was turned to the side. His expression didn't change at all, and he slowly turned his head and continued to meet my eyes. I wanted to hit him again, but he grabbed my wrist. Suddenly, I felt a dizzy spell, and Xiaoji pressed me on the bed. He controlled both of my wrists with one hand, making me unable to move, and sniffed me like a dog. I tremblingly asked the system in my heart, System, what's going on? Has the male protagonist really become a dog? The system was strangely silent for a long time, barely spitting out a sentence. Why don't you stab him quickly? I listened to the system and took out the knife from under the pillow and stabbed him when Xiaoji suddenly and inexplicably took off his clothes. Then I shouted, Xiaoji, I'll kill you. Sure enough, a group of guard rushed in. Even faster than them were their arrows. All of them perfectly avoided Xiaoji and stuck into me. Before closing my eyes, I thought, the male protagonist is indeed the male protagonist. It's so cold in this palace, but he's so hot that he's taking off his clothes. During the days when I was put in the coffin, I once asked the system how my stabbing skills were. The system said speechlessly, stabbing what? The male protagonist at most scratched his skin. Since it was just a scratch, how could Xiaoji still be thinking about taking revenge on me after 3 years? I died so cleanly at the time. How did he find me? Just as I was racking my brains, the door was suddenly pushed open. The person who came was Xiaoji, whom I was thinking about at the moment. I didn't look closely just now, but now I realized that he had changed a lot after not seeing him for a long time. His appearance was fully developed, his face was as flawless as beautiful jade, but his whole body exuded a gloomy aura that made people afraid. Sure enough, working overtime is harmful. When I was in power, I had to get up at 5 a.m. and sleep at 9 p.m. every day. Xiaoji should be about the same. Working such long hours every day, it's normal to have a lot of resentment. Royal sister, you're distracted again. Xiaoji had already stood in front of me at some point, and the breath he exhaled when he spoke hit my ears, bringing me back to my senses all at once. To be honest, he looked a bit scary now. The way he looked at me reminded me of some kind of dangerous beast, as if he could swallow people whole. I tried hard to meet his gaze, maintain my persona, and open my mouth coldly with a look of disgust. What do you want? Xiaoji twitched the corners of his mouth, revealing a stiff smile, moved closer, and grabbed my shoulder, almost touching me. Royal sister, for the past 3 years, I've been thinking about you every moment. According to Xiao Ji's vindictive nature, he must be thinking about how to bring me back and cut me into pieces every moment. But before he could finish his words, the door to the room was suddenly opened again. Chu Lan shouted, "Your Majesty." But her tone seemed to reveal a kind of inexplicable meaning, which immediately reminded Xiao Ji. His breathing suddenly became heavier, and he stared at me. I realized that his eyes had become so, almost to the point of being infatuated. As if he couldn't wait to chew my flesh and blood piece by piece and swallow it into his stomach to avenge himself. I was originally an ordinary office worker in the 21st century, and I died of overwork and transmigrated here. I thought I was finally going to live a life of wealth and glory. But I didn't expect that being a princess wasn't that easy. I had to memorize books and engage in political intrigue every day, and I also had to take care of the male protagonist who was freezing to death in the coal palace. The system said that I couldn't let the identity of the princess violate the persona in front of anyone except myself. So even if I wanted to give the male protagonist something, I had to do it secretly when it was dark and windy and there was no one around. The young Xiaoji was skinny, wearing only a thin coat, his hands were blue and purple from the cold, his face was pale, and only his lips were dry and cracked, stained red with blood. Perhaps because the coal palace usually didn't have many people coming, Xiaoji immediately stood up from the bed when he heard the sound and looked vigilantly in my direction. I was wearing a black robe and a mask. He recognized me after tapping the lantern handle twice. A little childish surprise flashed in his eyes, and he whispered my name. "Sister, you're here." I didn't speak. Because my identity at the moment was the mute daughter of the nanny who used to serve Xiaoji's mother. God knows how many nights I stayed up late to make Xiaoji believe this identity. Perhaps due to his tragic childhood, Xiaoji was much more precocious and suspicious than ordinary children, making it difficult for him to believe me. Fortunately, he was still a coal palace prince who was forgotten by everyone at this time. Even enemies were too lazy to pay attention to him. I came to give him things every now and then, and I would leave after giving them, without communicating with him. Slowly, he finally trusted me. This time was the same. I handed him the bulging cloth package in my hand and turned to leave. But Xiaoji suddenly reached out and grabbed the hem of my clothes. His tone was very cautious, and his eyes were also timid. "Sister, can you stay with me for a while longer?" This was the first time he had shown weakness to me after knowing each other for so long. I was stunned for a moment before realizing that he was only a 6-year-old child, no matter what. Living alone in this cold and damp coal palace, it was normal to be afraid. The system reminded me, "Host, be careful not to expose your identity." But looking at Xiaoji's pitiful appearance, I really couldn't say no. "Don't worry, he already trusts me now." Xiaoji curled up and lay on the only bed in the coal palace. Even when he fell asleep, he tightly grabbed my hand. I pinched his tender face and carefully pulled out my hand. It wasn't that I didn't want to continue to accompany him, but once it was dawn, the guards in the coal palace would also increase. It would be difficult to leave at that time. Under my occasional care, Xiaoji managed to survive unharmed until he was 14 years old. He also appeared more and more in front of everyone. At a party, I saw Xiaoji, whom I hadn't seen for a long time. The system reminded me. Xiaoji's biological mother is a princess of the former dynasty. The current emperor is the one who rebelled and took the throne back then. Perhaps because he felt guilty, several former dynasty officials who were related to the princess are still alive and still in the court, but their official positions are not high. They are also thinking about Xiaoji, and they finally waited until he was old enough to speak to the emperor about him. I looked in Xiaoji's direction seemingly unintentionally, secretly observing him. Children grow up so fast at this age. He seemed to have grown taller again after not seeing him for a few months, sitting there alone. I casually glanced at the emperor sitting in the high position. As the man did in the plot, he couldn't take his eyes off Xiao Ji the first time he saw him. Xiao Ji looked exactly like his mother. His appearance was handsome, his temperament was cold, and he looked like he didn't want anyone to approach him at a young age. From today onwards, the emperor would go from being indifferent to Xiao Ji to loving him because of his appearance. This was also the opportunity for Xiao Ji to take the first step on his path to becoming king. Just as I was thinking secretly, I suddenly heard an exclamation. A small servant was careless and accidentally poured hot soup on me. I kept a straight face on the surface, but my mind was blank. See, come, punish him with 20 strokes. I tried hard to relax and speak, but my voice couldn't stop trembling. I wanted to save him. The system noticed my intention and calmly reminded me, it's difficult to promote the plot, and it's also not easy to change the plot. This little servant is someone who helped the male protagonist, and it's also the first step for you and the male protagonist to become enemies. According to the plot, he will definitely die because of you tonight, and the male protagonist will hate you. Host, don't think so much. Would it be easier to treat these people as NPCs? Treat these people as NPCs. I bit my teeth hard and couldn't open my mouth no matter what. Everyone else thought I was extremely angry, and the emperor, who was sitting in the high position, also noticed the farce below. He just frowned and said lightly, "How dare you disturb the princess's interest? Drag him down." The little servant desperately grabbed my sleeves and kowtowed to beg for mercy, but how could he struggle past the royal guard? After a burst of wailing, there was gradually no sound outside the hall. The sound of silk and bamboo in the hall continued, the melodious music sounded, and everyone was chatting happily again. Only I sat there, opened my mouth, and found that I had lost my voice. The little servant who was grabbing my sleeves, his hand was obviously warm. He was obviously a person with flesh and blood like me. My persona was that I was spoiled by my mother since I was a child and raised to be arrogant. The princess was my code name, and killing people was my pleasure. I treated human life like dirt and killed at will. Whoever offended me, I would simply and rudely send him to see the king of hell. Although I tried to avoid it everywhere, people died one after another because of me. The little servant tonight wasn't the first person. In the 5th year after I came to this world, Qingya, the maid who had taken care of me since I was a child, was executed by the queen because I frowned at the fish she had put in my bowl when I was having dinner with the queen. I stared blankly ahead. Qingya, who had already left, and the little servant just now were standing there. They shed bloody tears, silently accusing me. I spent the rest of the party in a daze. That's why I didn't notice that the look in Xiao Ji's eyes was so strange. It wasn't the hatred of killing his benefactor, but a few hard-to-detect surprises. As the plot developed, I was very tired every day. Being a princess was already easy. But being a princess with great power was very difficult. Even with the help of the system, I could only barely do it. Seeing Xiao Ji growing up day by day, and even having a place of his own in the court, I finally didn't have to play 2 roles anymore, and I could say goodbye to the mute maid. The last time I went to see Xiao Ji, I didn't bring him anything, just some small things from outside the palace. Because he already had his own palace and wouldn't go hungry or freeze anymore. I handed him the things, but I didn't turn around and leave immediately. Xiao Ji seemed to have sensed something, and his face, which usually didn't have much expression, showed a bit of panic. I knew what he was afraid of. He had grown, and the mute maid was probably one of the few people who had brought him so much warmth for so long. But it didn't matter, the female protagonist would appear in his life soon. Xiao Ji would have a partner who could truly accompany him for the rest of his life. Sister, I'll go find the chief maid and transfer you to my palace. Xiaoji suddenly opened his mouth, looking at me with his eyes unbly. King. We rarely communicated, and I noticed that his voice was no longer a clear boyish voice, but had become a bit low and hoarse. I shook my head and gestured to tell him. No need, I'm already familiar with it over there. Xiaoji didn't say much, and said goodbye to me with a rare smile on his face. After that day, I never appeared as the mute maid again. So I hadn't seen Xiaoji for a long time. When he appeared at the flower viewing party and took the initiative to stand in front of me, not only was I shocked. The system was also shocked. The female protagonist is also on the list for this party. Could it be that the plot has advanced to here? I looked at Xiaoji without changing my expression. He bowed slightly and called me in a low voice, Royal Sister. I held the fan and slowly lifted his chin, disdainfully saying, a bastard, how dare you call me Royal Sister? The eldest prince, who had always been at odds with me, also sided with me for the first time. He mocked Xiaoji, isn't this His Highness the Fourth Prince? Why didn't you go to work hard today? But Xiaoran seemed to just want to say hello to me. Even if he was humiliated, he didn't say a word and turned around and sat down in his seat. The purpose of this flower viewing party was to select suitable marriage partners for the princes of marriageable age. All those who came here were famous young talents and young ladies from the capital. I lazily propped up my head, looking like I was just daydreaming, but in fact, I was secretly observing. System, has the female protagonist come yet? The party is about to start, why hasn't she appeared yet? The system was also a little anxious. She should have arrived according to reason. I'll go check. After a while, the system anxiously said. The eldest prince has taken a fancy to the female protagonist's general father's identity, and he has schemed to lock up the female protagonist, wanting to cook the rice and make it into cooked rice, and a LSO wants to blame Xiaoji. Quickly think of a way to save the female protagonist first. I was stunned for a moment, there wasn't this plot in the original plot, right? There wasn't in the original plot, but Xiaoji's career line has progressed too quickly, which has aroused the eldest prince's vigilance. The female protagonist's father is a general, and her identity fits the eldest prince's requirements for a fiancé. He can also get rid of Xiaoji at the same time. For them, this action is simply killing two birds with one stone. Where is the female protagonist? The nearest side hall. I gritted my teeth and ran wildly, my throat so dry that I almost vomited blood. Fortunately, when I rushed over, I happened to see the girl being carried into the room. They hadn't had time to do anything yet. I took advantage of the fact that those people had left and the eldest prince hadn't come over yet. I quickly rushed in, carried the female protagonist on my back, and ran. It's a pity that I was a sports failure who failed the 800-meter run in my previous life. In this life, I'm even more of a weak chicken who hasn't done any heavy work since I was born. I stubbornly carried a person who weighed about the same as me and ran for nearly a quarter of an hour before running to the place where the female attendants who attended the party changed their clothes. When I put the female protagonist down, I was so tired that I couldn't say a word. After a long time, I raised my head and found that the female protagonist's mouth and eyes were still blocked by cloth, and tears had already flowed down her face, and the cloth strips were wet. I quickly took the cloth out of her mouth and also untied the ropes on her hands, leaving only the cloth covering her eyes, and then made up a reason stammeringly. Miss Chu, I'm from the Fourth Prince. Our Highness discovered the eldest prince's scheme and couldn't bear to see innocent people being hurt, so he specially asked me to protect you. I deliberately lowered my voice, pretending to be an ordinary guard. Unexpectedly, Chu Lan suddenly pushed me down with force. Her face was flushed, and her breath was like orchids, as if she was already very uncomfortable. I've been drugged, help me. I petrified on the spot. Wait. I struggled hard, trying to discuss it with her. But running all the way just now had exhausted all my strength, and I was easily suppressed by the female protagonist. The system was also helpless. What should I do? There's still a plot where the female protagonist saves the hero. I was angry. Why are you still thinking about the plot at this time? Think of a way. Think of a way. Think of a way. Isn't there any golden finger? You're also a... The system thought for a long time and said with heartache. Okay, there is one. It can transfer the effect of the medicine on the female protagonist to you, but the golden finger can only be used once. Are you sure you want to use it now? Change. I didn't have time to think so much. Chu Lan's breathing gradually calmed down. She seemed to have noticed her own changes and said it in confusion. I took the opportunity to push her away and ran away. The more I ran, the weaker I became. The itchiness seemed to seep out from the bone marrow. By the time I returned to the party, my body was already as soft as noodles. I could only barely support myself to sit down. I couldn't OOC in front of anyone, so I had to do it myself. How could any villain do what I do, working 2 jobs alone? In the eyes of outsiders, I just went out for a walk and came back because I was impatient. It didn't make a difference whether I was there or not. No one knew how unbearable I was at the moment. So much so that not long after the party started, I deliberately threw the pendant into the lake next to me. Then I looked in Xiao Ji's direction. Unexpectedly, I accidentally met his eyes. I had a STR. And feeling that he seemed to have been looking at me for a long time. I inexplicably felt a bit flustered, but I still made a playful expression and said my lines. Fourth Prince, can you help me find the pendant back? Silence descended upon the scene. My deliberate gesture wasn't subtle. However, given my reputation for arrogance, unpredictable moods, and antagonistic relationship with Xiao Ji in the court, suddenly targeting him seemed normal. Many noticed. Some watched with amusement, others with pity. Xiao Ji, however, stood up promptly and jumped into the lake without a word. Though it was already summer, the water was still frigid. Some secretly worried. Xiao Ji submerged himself, surfacing for air only after a long while. This continued repeatedly, but the pendant remained unfound. Barely a quarter of an hour passed before I impatiently rose from my seat, leaving the party with a single sentence. How boring. Tell Xiao Ji I don't want the pendant. Though the male protagonist suffered, the female protagonist would offer warmth after everyone left. I was truly alone. Returning to the royal palace, I dismissed all the maids and immersed myself in cold water. Shivers racked my body, yet I still felt unwell. I couldn't seek a physician and had to grit my teeth and endure. Suppressing my instincts, I plunged myself completely underwater. After the male and female protagonists met, the plot would be set in motion. My only worry was Chu Lan's affection level. Despite my efforts to create opportunities for her and Xiao Ji, it didn't budge. After a lengthy investigation, the system returned with devastating news. Chu Lan isn't attracted to the male protagonist. Her affections have turned to you, or rather, to you disguised as the guard who saved her. Hearing this, I nearly fainted. Fortunately, Xiao Ji was capable. While I was busy trying to win Chu Lan's affection, Xiao Ji had thrown the court into chaos. I successfully infiltrated the general's mansion, becoming one of Chu Lan's personal guards. Lacking martial skills, I relied on her gratitude for saving her to get a backdoor entry. Luckily, the guards at the general's mansion worked in shifts, so I was only on duty every 3 days. Though Chu Lan seemed like an innocent girl, she was, after all, the general's legitimate daughter, a tiger general's daughter. Though physically weak, she was kind and loved nothing more than to right wrongs. What did she shout? Of course, at us unlucky guards. Tables, stools, spoons, chopsticks, on the double. Tables, spoons, and chopsticks were my colleagues, I was stool. These were our code names. At the young mistress's command, we dared not disobey. Fortunately, Tables and the others were skilled, so I always managed to slack off. But being inept, I was often caught in the crossfire. After a battle, I was always the one who seemed to be fighting the hardest for Chu Lan. This made the female protagonist remember me. I thought you were more fragile than I am, but I didn't expect you to be so brave. Chu Lan personally applied ointment to my face, praising me. I immediately grasped her hand, looking into her eyes sincerely, trying to make her understand my loyalty. It's all I should do. Chu Lan's face flushed red, and she stammered, "Why yes." I remembered I was cross-dressing, and my face also burned. The system sarcastically commented, "You're quite the charmer." I humbly replied, "Just average." To win her over, I made tireless efforts, including but not limited to heroic rescues, stylish entrances, shielding her from harm, playing with her, writing her love letters, and sending her flowers. You might ask if my conscience was clear deceiving such an innocent girl. I can only say that the affections were, but the joy when playing with her, the worry when she was in danger, the heartache when caring for her when she was sick, those weren't fake. Soon, Chu Lan, a girl just entering love, easily fell for me. I immediately arranged a perfect accident, being killed by bandits while protecting Chu Lan on an outing. Of course, it wasn't real, all the bandits were my men. The moment I closed my eyes, her affection level finally reached its peak. I thought it was my tragic departure that made Chu Lan's feelings so profound. After her father became loyal to Xiao Ji, he suggested a marriage alliance between Chu Lan and Xiao Ji. But Chu Lan refused, telling everyone she was no longer chaste and had been with the little guard who died saving her. This ruined the reputation of the general's legitimate daughter. No noble would marry a woman who had been intimate with a guard, even if she was the general's daughter. I saw the male and female protagonists again at the Grand Prince's funeral. Everyone was dressed in mourning, standing in the procession for the deceased. The emperor had 3 princes and 1 princess. The Grand Prince's maternal family was the most powerful. His mother was Zhao Guifei, and Zhao Galao was his maternal grandfather. Second was the second prince, whose uncle was a censor, supervising officials, and equally formidable. Xiao Ji cleverly hid himself, subtly sowing discord, letting the second prince, who rarely acted, eliminate his rivals. Of course, the second prince also suffered losses. I discreetly observed my surroundings, suddenly noticing an unfamiliar handsome face. The system introduced him. That's Xinjiang, the second male lead. The title of First Gentleman of the capital isn't an exaggeration, is it? I silently gasped in agreement. It truly isn't. You and Xinjiang are also related. His mother is your mother's distant cousin. He's your cousin according to seniority. According to the plot, Xinjiang's father originally supported you, but after you humiliated his son, the Xin family defected to the male protagonist. Forced acquisition. I clicked my tongue. Finally, a segment I enjoy. No wonder so many male protagonists in novels like coercion. Looking at Xinjiang, stripped and tied up on my bed, I cleared my throat and comforted him. Don't worry, I won't force you to do anything. The system was speechless. If you're not going to do anything, why did you tie him up? You're going to be OOC. I quickly tried to justify myself. I am a very conservative person. I believe some things can only be done after marriage. I'm sure you think so too, cousin, haha. Xinjiang remained silent, his face cold, treating me like air. I felt a little defeated but continued. If you don't want to be my consort, you can be my male escort. Xinjiang's expression was extremely unpleasant. He gritted his teeth, spitting out 4 words. I will never consent. Is my reputation that bad now? I sadly asked the system. Unwilling is unwilling, but to swear never to consent. Look on the bright side, your persona hasn't collapsed at all. I ignored him. Xinjiang's father requested to see me, his attitude polite at first. He suggested that since the princess had taken a fancy to his son, there was no need to force him. After all, we were on the same side, and we could discuss the marriage properly. My goal was to anger him, so I wouldn't be polite. I smiled and told him that his son was ungrateful. His personality didn't deserve to be my consort, at most a male escort. The Prime Minister Shin left in anger. Because I had made too much noise when kidnapping Xinjiang, Prime Minister Shin asked the Emperor to arrange a marriage between me and Xinjiang for his son's sake. The marriage was just a pretense. The day after leaving my princess manor, Prime Minister Shin offered Shao Ji his loyalty. The system was worried. Shao Ji is growing too fast. With Prime Minister Shin's defection, at least half of the court is on his side. How will you maintain your power? Facts proved that no one is unlucky forever. I finally got lucky. Urgent news RE. Ved from the border, the Xiongnu were invading, and the war had spread to several cities. At such a critical moment, Shao Ji volunteered to go to the front lines. Before he left, the second prince had been suppressed, unable to rise again. The emperor's health had declined since the grand prince's death, and he hadn't attended the morning court for several days. The vast court was left to me alone. By the time Shao Ji returned from pacifying the border, I had completely taken control of the situation. On New Year's Eve, while the royal palace was peaceful, the emperor died. I led people into Shao Ji's palace, finding him standing there, as if he knew I was coming. Seeing me, he turned around, a shy smile on his face, and softly called out, "Royal sister, you've come." I was momentarily stunned, unsure what he meant. The system suddenly said, "Wait, the male protagonist isn't right." Shao Ji bent down and embraced my waist, whispering, or, I should call you, elder sister. Warning! Warning! The host is displaying OOC behavior. Please correct your persona within 30 minutes, or you will die immediately. Warning! Warning! A piercing alarm sounded in my head, and my body broke out in a cold sweat. The system struggled to speak. The male protagonist, static knows you're that, static mute made. Quickly find a way to fix your persona, or you'll be annihilated by the world's consciousness. I raised my cold hand and slapped Shao Ji hard. Then, looking at him with a playful gaze, I sneered. I told you long ago, you bastard, who allowed you to call me royal sister? Shao Ji's hand slowly fell, staring blankly at me. I was only playing a little game with you for your identity. The fourth prince really took it seriously. The alarm gradually disappeared. I clapped my hands with a smile, and a group of maids entered in single file, carrying bright yellow royal robes. Quick, dress our emperor and prepare for the enthronement. What's I? T like to step on the emperor? Thank you for asking, it doesn't feel good. Shao Ji knelt on the ground, and I casually used him as a footstool. 2 maids fanned me with a cooling breeze behind me, and a cold beauty, Xinjiang, peeled grapes for me. Although it seemed enjoyable, no one knew the suffering in my heart. What I was doing to Xiaoji now, he would repay me in full in the end. I only hoped the system wouldn't fail me then. Xiaoji was worthy of being the male protagonist. After realizing my true nature, he began to slowly reclaim what was his. I was happy to let him, secretly helping him along the way. I pretended to be blinded by power, spending my days playing with male escorts or enjoying humiliating Xiaoji. I would hit and scold him, venting my anger on him at the slightest dissatisfaction. He was very tolerant, never retaliating. If I didn't have God's perspective, I might have thought he was completely under my control. Thinking back, I was lucky when I faked my death. Xiaoji didn't have time to torture me. If I were him, an emperor, being humiliated like this every day, I would skin and cramp that person, subjecting them to every kind of torture. The more I thought about it, the more afraid I became. Although he didn't have time then, didn't the opportunity arise again now? Royal sister, I won't give you another chance to leave. Xiaoji finally spoke. He lived up to his words. I was locked in Xiaoji's bedroom, unable to go anywhere, and he watched me personally every day. During the day, I sat by the window, bored, while Xiaoji sat opposite me, handling official duties. Even at night, he would sleep on a small cot not far from me, separated only by a screen, and we could clearly hear each other's breathing. Over time, I gradually realized that this was Xiaoji's way of torturing me. The longer he didn't act, the more terrified I became. It would be better to kill me quickly. I feared that he would suddenly get the urge to drag me to the dung and torture me properly. Then, I would be unable to live or die. After understanding this, I couldn't eat or sleep well. After only a few days, I had dark circles under my eyes and had lost a lot of weight. Perhaps my constant size affected Xiaoji. He looked at me with increasing displeasure, often frowning. I became more afraid, hiding a hairpin in my sleeve for emergencies. Sure enough, my sixth sense was always accurate. It seemed that a general had returned victorious, and the palace held a celebration banquet. Xiaoji hadn't returned even when it was completely dark. Without him, I felt very safe and fell into a deep sleep. I had probably only slept for less than an hour when someone woke me up by pinching me. The person was very strong and smelled faintly of alcohol, as if they were drunk and didn't know how to control their strength. They were trying to pinch me, but their hands couldn't find the right spot, and my clothes were almost torn apart. I struggled in vain, feeling that my life was very miserable and that I might as well die. So, I simply opened my arms and stopped resisting. This day had finally come. I had lived 2 lives, only enjoying 3 years of true happiness. The rest of my days were spent either working overtime for a black-hearted boss or working for a dam system. At least the black-hearted boss had annual leave, the dam system had given me no days off for 19 years. What was the point of living such a life? I was overwhelmed with sorrow, and tears couldn't help but flow. The person on top of me suddenly stopped moving. Why are you crying? His voice was deep, with a hint of inexplicable anger. Do you hate me that much? It turned out that Xiaoji was going to do it himself. Since I was going to die anyway, I wasn't afraid of him anymore and stubbornly turned my head away. Xiaoji's hands to mark. He didn't seem to want to hear my reply, continuing to speak to himself. Why are you so kind to everyone? Making them still remember you. Do you know that Chu Lan, after winning the battle, asked for the reward of letting you out of the palace? Xiaoji suddenly laughed, but the laughter contained a hint of sorrow, as if I had done something to him. Royal sister, I really want to. Strangling me to death, right? I closed my eyes tightly, waiting for death. But the first thing I felt was the softness on my lips. And something a little wet and salty, like tears. The next day, I woke up at dusk. I looked at the ceiling in a daze, recalling what happened last night, and my body shuddered. The huge palace was empty, as if everything was a nightmare. The last memory was of Xiao Ji's kiss shocking my entire body. Then, I finally slapped him for the first time with genuine emotion, also saying some famous lines from incest stories I had read in my previous life. I am your ex. It wasn't that imposing, I was so scared that my voice trembled. I am your sister. Xiao Ji sighed, his words full of satisfaction. So what, my royal sister? I rubbed my face hard, unable to understand how a wholesome ancient romance had gone so far down the road of incest. Just as I was worrying, I suddenly heard the voices of maids arguing outside the door. Did you hear about the fire at Changle Palace last night? The fire was so big everyone saw it. Luckily, His Majesty is okay. Only one person died last night, the Grand Princess who was just found. Ah, it's a pity. I heard that the Grand Princess was in her prime, full of youth. Fire in Changle Palace? Death of the Grand Princess? I was full of questions, just about to get out of bed to ask what was going on, but I bumped into the railing. I looked up and realized that I, along with the bed, was locked in a huge golden cage. The cage was very sturdy, and no matter how hard I shook it, it wouldn't budge. I shouted loudly for someone, but I didn't know if there's no one outside or if the room was soundproof. I shouted all afternoon, my throat almost smoking, but no one paid attention to me. Until it got dark, the door was opened from the outside. Xiao Ji silently came in from outside. He took off his coat as he walked, not saying a word, with no expression on his face. I lay on the bed shivering, sweating anxiously, and frantically called the system. Damn system! If you don't come back, this story will develop into something that can't be broadcast. Xiao Ji used the key to open the cage door, slowly approaching the bed. I buried myself in the blanket, unable to see his expression. Royal sister, it's time to rest. Xiao Ji's tone was very calm, even a little cheerful. At the crucial moment, I suddenly heard a familiar voice in my head. Host, I'm here. I almost cried with joy. System! Save me! The system observed the current situation, clicking its tongue twice. I've already applied for a second fake death opportunity for you on the way here. Find a way to anger Xiao Ji so that he kills you again. Okay. I gritted my teeth and raised my hand to slap him when Xiao Ji touched me. But I forgot that this trick no longer worked on him. Xiao Ji's breathing quickened, his voice panting. Again, royal sister. As he said that, he leaned down and bit my right shoulder hard, which was exposed because of the struggle. I closed my eyes, pulled out the hairpin from my sleeve, hardened my heart, and stabbed down hard. Over the years, my stabbing skills had improved a bit. At least from the level of scratching the skin to being able to insert it into the flesh. I can't tell, host, you're quite ruthless yourself. My face was pale, and I smiled weakly, taking it as a compliment. The system didn't let me go, continuing to mock me. Hey, it's better not to stab at all, anyway, you won't die, and you can suffer less. I ignored him, covering the wound and struggling to run. Yes, I ran again. Xiao Ji had locked me in a secret compartment in a palace, not letting anyone know of my existence. I wanted to simply commit suicide to fake my death, but I didn't stab myself to death, so I took advantage of the time when Xiao Ji went out to call a doctor to run. Fortunately, I was familiar with the palace and knew of a secret passage leading out of the city. But I knew that Xiao Ji might also know. So, I couldn't relax for a moment. I ran for almost a day, and no one chased after me. Fortunately, I bet right. The road ahead gradually became brighter. I used the last of my strength to rush over. Someone caught me firmly in their arms. The wound is healing well. Chu Lan looked at it carefully for a while and came to a conclusion. I was really embarrassed, answering stammeringly. Thank you, Miss Chu. This was the third time I was saved by Chu Lan. She seemed to be very busy every day. Although it was wrong to think so, I couldn't help but think it was good that she was busy. Because I was ashamed of her and didn't dare to look at her. Although my identity when I transmigrated was the villain, the education I received since childhood made me not want to hurt anyone casually. In this world, the only 3 people I was sorry for were the little eunuch, Qingya, and one was Chu Lan. In this era where reputation was more important than life for women, I had harmed her. The first few times we met, either I was half asleep or Chu Lan had important matters and didn't have time to talk to me. Today, she seemed to have a lot of time, having been sitting next to me for a while. Chu Lan looked at me quietly and suddenly spoke. Your Highness, do you know how I found out? I had always guessed that Chu Lan could know my true identity because of the flaws I left behind when I first saved her. I lied at that time and said that I was Xiao Ji's man. Chu Lan may have accidentally discovered something strange later when she allied with Xiao Ji. But she personally shattered my goose. After you died, I went back and asked my father to end you. He thoroughly investigated and found that the bandits that day were very strange. The capital was heavily guarded, and ordinary bandits wouldn't dare to approach the surrounding area. How did those people dare to? Chu Lan looked at me without blinking, slowly speaking. I sensed something was wrong and decided to open the coffin for an autopsy. The coffin was empty. I told myself that you must have some difficulties. My father asked me to marry, but I would rather die than agree. I have been looking for you until I saw the Grand Princess at the Grand Prince's funeral. How could the figure of the high and mighty Grand Princess be so similar to the little guard I was thinking about day and night? I didn't dare to believe it until after the Grand Princess died. His Majesty got drunk and ran to the imperial tomb alone, opened the coffin, and it was also empty. You should be able to guess what happened next. I never dared to look up. Xiao Lan, there must be a powerful sorcerer helping you fake your death twice successfully. Otherwise, Xiao Ji watched you being pierced by 10,000 arrows with his own eyes, and I also watched you being pierced through the heart with a knife. How could you still be alive? Chu Lan suddenly approached, and I noticed the tears faintly overflowing from the corners of her eyes. I know that you don't like the palace, don't like to be in power, but you care about the world. You saw that the Grand Prince and the Second Prince were all glitter and no substance, and you also saw Xiao Ji's talent. You thought he could be a wise ruler. So, you secretly helped him, even helped him approach me, saved me, let me think that you were really his man, and let my father support him. After Xiao Ji successfully ascended the throne, you were relieved. You yearned for freedom, so you left. I can understand you. After Xiao Ji ascended the throne, he promised me that as a woman, I could inherit my father's position. For these 3 years, I have been practicing hard every day, following my father to fight in all directions. Although the battlefield is dangerous, and I may die in the next second, I like this feeling. I never want to be a young lady confined to her room again. A drop of coolness landed on my cheek. I forgive you. Xiao Ji found me 5 months after I left the palace. Chu Lan protected me behind her, confronting him silently. The soldiers behind us turned their swords towards me and Chu Lan the moment Xiao Ji appeared. After not seeing him for many days, Xiao Ji seemed even more mad. His eyes were bloodshot, and his gaze when looking at people was alarming. He seemed sick, his face very pale, and his voice sounded very hoarse. Chu Lan, let go of my royal sister, and I'll spare you. The system was a little worried and reminded me, the male protagonist's state isn't right. Try to stabilize him. The male and female protagonists are the core of this world. If anything happens to either of them, the world will collapse. I sighed and answered understood in my heart. Then, I took the initiative to step out and face Xiaoji. I'll go with you, don't make things difficult for her. Xiaoji's face became even uglier, but he still took my hand. Okay. Xiaoji seemed to have figured things out overnight. Although he forcibly brought me back to the palace and occasionally touched me, he was willing to let me leave the palace. Royal sister, remember to come back in a month. Xiaoji's fingers caressed my cheek ambiguously, and he said in a deep voice. I nodded. I had resigned myself to fate. As long as Xiaoji didn't get tired of it in this life, I would never get rid of him. Fortunately, he was sincere enough, so I could restrain him and make myself feel better. On the first day I left the palace openly, 2 people came to see me off. I wanted to trave when it was cool, so I prepared before dawn. Shulan handed me a heavy package, instructing me expressionlessly, be careful when you're out. Remember to write. I smiled and said okay. She looked at me deeply, without saying anything more, turning to leave before me. After she walked away, I looked at Xinjiang next to me, cheered myself up in my heart, and opened my mouth awkwardly. About what happened back then. I'm sorry. Xinjiang also looked at me, still with that cold face, but there was something I couldn't understand in his eyes. Fortunately, his tone was very peaceful, only asking a very abrupt question. Did your highness do all that back then just to help his majesty win my father's support? Besides that, what other reason could I give? Could I tell him that the system was to blame? I could only nod. Xinjiang paused for a while before finally opening his mouth. Your highness is really thinking of the people. I smiled guiltily. Now his majesty values your highness very much. So don't stay out for too long, come back and visit often. I nodded. Chulan had said that when I was hiding in her mansion, Xinjiang had also helped me cover it up. In my heart, he was indeed a good person. Just a little too quiet. Xinjiang didn't say anything again, just looked at me, and the atmosphere was really a bit awkward. I waited for a while, finally mustered the courage to say, Lord Xin, I'm leaving. Xinjiang nodded. As I turned my horse to leave, I felt someone's gaze on me from the city walls, someone who should have been on their way to court. But remembering how outrageous he had been last night, I deliberately didn't look back. The system sighed, this mission is way too hard. I'm applying for a bonus. I nodded in agreement. Things should be quiet after this, host. I'm heading back. Goodbye, system. Hopefully, this is really goodbye this time, haha. The system didn't reply. The sun gradually rose, the BR. light illuminating the path ahead. I spurred my horse and rode on.